1 hour. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Girish. And welcome to all my fellow industry leaders for being the part of this first keynote panel. And as I said, the whole concept of retreat was more a discussion rather than a panel discussion. I think we will keep that format on, but with a little more, organized way, because we do not have the luxury of it. I think Arif was there on the first retreat also. That was physical, and I think that has a very different format. But I think we will go back to the physical one once we come back to the normal. To start the session, let me raise a few questions. As I said in my keynote address, these were larger macro issues, those issues which are, contextual. Those issues are outside-in factors in terms of defining strategies. Those factors help us to build scenarios and hence build capabilities. Now, in this keynote factor, I thought we will look at the dynamics of disruptions, their impact on uncertainty for businesses, and how they have affected the overall ecosystem of business. What has been the response of the organizations, and what are the future strategies to visibly create a capability in order to manage further such disruptions or minimize these disruptions. Because, as I said, organizations whose time of recovery would have been, less than the time of survival will die. And I think this pandemic has clearly brought about that particular fact. And as in our discussion, I said we look at key themes for India first, and then look at within that what has been happening. I know that if I look at the pandemic, I see 3 or 4 major shifts that has happened. One, there has been a complete shift in the basket of consumption, primarily because of the different incidents of this pandemic over a period of time. There has been some revival and some reversal and some new trends. So the consumer behaviors have changed. 2, because of the intensity of the epidemic and no contact policies and lockdowns, we have seen a sudden surge of no contact consumption behavior, and hence the rise of the omni-channel and the e-commerce. Third, we have seen unprecedented movement of people in an underdeveloped economy from urban to rural areas, which essentially also points out to us, the lower growth of logistics in the economy. A student of mine, I was speaking to him post GST. He's a speaker and moderating the second panel, Satish. He told me, and he said a very interesting thing in that discussion that we had while having dinner, that logistics is the lifeline of the economy. If you see an upsurge, you see a growth. And I think that's so true. You have seen any upsurge, even during pandemic, you have seen the growth. And hence, what we have seen very clearly is that logistics, like any other commodity, even though being serviced, is blind to the country beyond certain geographies. It's a black spot. And hence, that's a challenge that we have. Fourth trend that we saw was that there was a lot of collaboration, especially in the user companies and the clients that we have. We saw that people came in the war room, decided tomorrow's replenishment, fulfillment, collaborated well. They secured their logistics for the day, they secured their supplies for the day, and they planned for the day, and planned for the hours, and planned for the localities which were not yellow, green, or yellow. So I think there has been so many challenges that came up, but there has been a brilliant business continuity from all players, and it has also exposed players of their vulnerability. To start the discussion, I will first take up the discussion with Sachin. Sachin, you are a kind of a service provider which has been widely recognized in terms of mode of transportation, but has been kept aside for so many unknown reasons. As I said, the share of the rail is 50, it has remained 50 for so many years, and it has not changed. Even a slight change would make India amazing, because the rail connectivity in this country is so brilliant. It's like the post office. Post office connectivity is great for the last mile delivery. We have not used it. Postal, courier, and express have remained, a far-off dream from performing the things that they could have really performed. Rail also has been perceived that way. I would like to know from you that what are the infrastructural changes and how has the dynamics of rail helped businesses along with government in terms of movement of essentials, life-saving drugs, vaccines, and others.
Thank you, Dr. Singh. It's always a pleasure to be a part of the India Logistics Strategy Retreat, and this is the second edition wherein I am quite happy to be a part of such a distinguished panel. So thank you so much for having me here. I completely agree with you that Indian Railways, like the post office, the classical post office in India, is omnipresent. But it is omnipresent from a passenger service point of view. So see railway stations at dotting the entire map of India. And in case of any crisis, the first call from a savior point of view goes to the railway station. As far as freight transport is concerned, we started at around independence. We started with a very robust share with the Indian Railways, because the road penetration as well as production activity in India was very limited. And the initial impetus to the manufacturing sector primarily came in infrastructure sector, which required transportation of coal, which required transportation of minerals to the steel plants and other metal plants, transportation of cement from cement and clinker from the cement plants to the construction site. There was a food crisis, so food grain and fertilizer transportation had to take place. And Indian Railways kind of has been very successful in taking care of the demand of the economy at that point in time. However, over a period of time, as the production activity started developing in manufactured goods space, Indian Railways lagged behind. Not only lagged behind, its share actually dropped over a period of time and dropped all the way from 75-80% to down to about 35% currently. The opting out arose primarily out of focusing on large parcel size, long distance, heavyweight cargo transportation as the mainstay of Indian Railways freight transportation option. It actually opted out of small parcel size business, which would have easily catered to the manufacturing sector. When we say manufacturing sector, I'm looking at both the consumer-oriented manufacturing sector as well as the industrial manufacturing sector. So you will have consumer durable, automobiles, the consumer goods by themselves, as well as industrial assemblies, sub-assemblies, spare parts, as well as finished goods from the industrial production sector, what we classically call the machine tools, etc. So from this point of view, Indian Railways opting out primarily was on account of not adequate capacity being created by Indian Railways on its railway network as well as on its delivery network. So the terminals and the route capacity lagged behind as far as the overall demand of the society, the demand of the economy was concerned. We also have experienced one important crisis in the logistics space. And when I say logistics space, I not only cover road transportation, rail transportation, but also road transportation and its integration. There has been a great double guessing game which has been going on for the last 50 years between the official side, the government, and the service provider side. There is no crisp clarity as to what does logistics service provider expect from the government, nor does the government know exactly how logistics service providers are progressing as far as their transport facilities, warehousing facilities, switching between modes facilities, etc. are concerned. I'll give a small example. The industrial policy is primarily driven by the state. Mostly, it's a state subject with some exceptions. Part of it is also in the union list as far as the constitution is concerned. However, it is largely driven by the states. There are state industrial development corporations which acquire land by way of a state mechanism and develop industrial estates. None of these industrial estates have an intermodal terminal where road rail access is available for the purpose of evacuation of cargo, whether it is inbound cargo for the purpose of production or outbound cargo for the purpose of distribution is concerned. So unless there is a national logistics vision and national logistics policy, we've been seeing that national logistics policies on the anvil for the last 4 or 5 years, but we haven't seen yet the document being released by Government of India. And unless there is clarity, the crispness with which the 4 or 5 overlays in logistics play are brought out, it will not be possible to bring in the integration that you're mentioning. So I would put these overlays as, let's say, we need hard infrastructure, which will include roadways, railways, railroads, terminals where exchange can take place between road and rail, switch can take place, transit warehouses, as well as distribution warehouses. The industry involving, let's say, transit warehousing and distribution warehouses is something which is primarily driven by the private sector. And they do it according to that a particular industry's requirement. I think Mr. Jasjit Sethi is an expert on this, so I will leave that part of it for him to cover. But from an infrastructure overlay point of view, we still have a disjoint overlay of infrastructure integrating roadways, railroads, and switching locations as required from a manufacturing sector point of view is concerned. The second overlay is that of regulatory and the legal overlay, wherein I feel that not having a national vision, not having a national policy, not having a policy which requires the industrial development corporations to come out with industrial estates along with logistics aspect of that industrial estate is something which is, let's say, little unprepared for the integration challenge that we're looking at. The third overlay is that of operator overlay. Operator overlay, wherein there are intermodal operators, there are trucking companies, there are rail transportation consolidators, there are warehousing companies, then there are supply chain solutions providers who are the 3PL operators, wherein not necessarily based on their own hard infrastructure, but by integrating hard infrastructure which is available in the industry, they come out with solutions which are delivered as solution to the industry. The integration overlay comes out of these 3PL players. Again, an expertise I would leave to Mr. Jasjit Sethi. The fourth one is the market overlay, and the market overlay to a very great extent has been able to establish itself. But to bring out the larger point that you made, that the market overlay actually has shifted its attention from railroads to road-only option. International trade as well, if you look at it, the actual international trade is done on land. It is not done on ocean. Ocean is only a water bridge. The activity has to take place on the land. And even on land, transportation is not complete unless you have a combination of road, rail, road. Road alone can provide a service, but then it is inefficient, it is not as green, it is not as sustainable. It also has a lot of issues with respect to the labor, the workmen which are employed in this sector. It is largely unregulated. It involves a huge amount of exploitation of manpower, the workmen in this sector. So from that point of view, that kind of intervention by the regulatory authorities is completely absent in order to bring the road-only mode into a road, rail, road mode, which is what we call intermodal, or sometimes in international parlance, it is also called multimodal. So unless this comes in, the growth of economy captured by the manufacturing sector cannot be delivered effectively by a greener, sustainable transportation mode. So these are the points which I would like to put forth. And I'm open to any deliberation or to take questions on this. Thank you, Dr. Singh. Dr. Singh, you're on mute, so we can't hear you.
Thank you, Sachin. And let me go to Jasdeep. Welcome, Jasdeep. I think it will be very interesting to hear from you how 3PLs are using their diverse capabilities in terms of managing the current uncertainty and creating business continuity program for themselves and their partners. And what are your views on the future capabilities that are being worked on by you or either by your partners, which are paving way for organizations like yours becoming more resilient?
Thanks, Dr. Singh. It's good to be here, and great thoughts which we heard from you early in the opening session. I think what Mr. Bhanushali also just mentioned was just beautiful. I think he put the perspectives very much clearer, and it's great that he went first because he put the larger subject in place. So I think first let's look at the last year, the COVID scenario, because that is something which is on top of our minds. I think COVID scenario, the supply chains did exceptionally well. We all managed the show very, very well, much better than people expected. And I think why people didn't expect was because most of the papers you would read and say that India's logistics cost is high, infra is bad, blah, blah, blah. But what is beyond that, what is beyond that are the emotions which we Indians have. And I think we are very good at firefighting. In firefighting, we just excelled and we did things which were almost unheard of. And nobody went hungry because of lack of food. If there was medicine available, it was moved. Even the last crisis, if oxygen was there, we moved it as well. So in terms of supply chain, I think they came up trumps and they came out tops. So if they could do so well in a crisis, what is wrong with Indian logistics? What's the problem? I think the problems, like Mr. Bhanushali mentioned, are mainly linked to these multimodal networks not working together, working in silos. That is one major problem. The interchanges are not very well put. The industrial parks don't have an area for a truck parking. So your truck parking is somewhere else, and when there's a load required, the trucks go all over the town and create traffic hazards. So it's just basically planning faults which are coming out on the roads and the network. But having said that, and given that, the network per se of people, warehouses, be it coastal shipping or rail transportation, be it the container train operators or the traditional VPUs, the trucks, the local vehicles, that is very unique to India. And one simple example, if you were to go to Europe and ask what a FTL is, and FTL means a 40-feet container. Go to US, it means a 53-feet container. And everything else is less than truckload. What's a FTL in India? You also have a 40-feeter, you also have a 20-feeter, you have a 15-feeter also going all over the place. So our logistics is so different than anywhere else. That also has got its own beauty, that we are able to be more resilient in times like these. Because we don't have a process and a system, when there is no need, when there is a crisis, we do better. But having said that, are we more expensive than the rest of the world? Do we burn more fuel than we need to? Actually, no. And a lot of times, I think we in these forums kind of trash ourselves, unfortunately. Hamara costs are the logistics costs and all that, what blah, blah, blah. Now, people say 13% of the GDP. Come on. GDP is 60% services. If it is 13 to 14%, that means the cost of logistics for every company is 20 to 30%. No one can survive on that. We have economic survey which comes out. It shows the cost at about 5-6%. So actually, India is very competitive in even logistics. Why we are competitive? Because we are unorganized. So there are many areas like in trucking, the minimum wages what a trucker should get and what he's getting is not the same. The whole industry per se runs on outsourced workers. So actually the only way the cost in India can go is northwards. It cannot go southwards. When we build these better quality terminals, it will again go northwards. But till that time, and that bridging time will take maybe 3 to 5 to 7 years as we get more organized. That bridge is being beautifully made by digital. So the crisis we showed in the port of in China. Now, we run hubs and the company like Gateway run terminals. We all have predictive analysis where we know what is going to be our load tomorrow, day after, and the day after. So we use data to actually able to forecast what kind of a status we are going to be 5 days hence. So it's a surprise that our third largest port in the world didn't use that data to divert those ships, and it became that kind of a crisis. In all our hubs, these are daily issues where we do not know the traffic is going to be very high in the month end, low in the middle. If there's a sale of an e-commerce play, it's going to be a different thing altogether. But we use data for that. So I think what helped India was this data in terms of our networks being very resilient. We knew what exactly was going in and out. Also, I think the telecom networks also stood very strong. The GPS network of the country, the e-waybill network of the country, these are also supporting functions. So we have become much more digitalized than Europe. Till now, the EU does not have a digital platform like an e-waybill. India has that. So we are able to actually track all the traffic flows on a real-time basis, which can't be done in the biggest markets in the world. So I think this bridge between where we are now and where we want to go has been done by data, and the private organizations such as ours have done their job as well. Now, just closing on the point of a 3PL, I think the role of a 3PL actually is to connect the dots between a service need and a service being deployed. Also look at utilizing the infra very well. But a 3PL in India also needs to be asset medium. It cannot be just very asset light. And those days where a 3PL is more like a 4PL, which is asset light, are not going to be there, because in these times, what we realized was that some amount of infra you need to have. You need to ensure that you have some amount of bandwidth and dedicated networks with you, be it warehousing, hubs, or this. And hence in India, the 3PL is somewhere different from what we see traditionally happening in Europe and other markets. I think I'll pause here, Dr. Rakesh, and leave it to your comments and others to come in.
Right. We'll get back to some interesting contradictory statements, I think, at the end of the discussion when we look into the question answer sessions. But I'll get here Arif here. Arif has been a veteran. He has handled a 3PL. Now he runs a warehousing design company. He is an enthusiast of distribution academics. And hence, Arif, how do you see this overall transition of logistics players from a 3PL perspective, and largely in terms of the kind of changes that you've seen and that are happening in the distribution and the last mile delivery? Well, India needs a different kind of last mile delivery. It's a very vast geographic area, and last mile delivery definition would also include maybe rural and tier 2 cities, as I told you.
Thanks, Dr. Singh, and hello everyone here on the panel. First of all, let me just immediately bring out the top thought that running at this moment. I think we have a very great session going on, and this format seems to be really bringing out, the real thoughts. What Sachin said, I think I compliment him for putting a very complex scenario so simple. What Jasjeet said, sounds very positive and factual from that point of view. I mean, the positivity is not about optimism, but the positivity is also with regards to realism. Fine. Specifically, it's got proven with the way the third-party logistics companies, be small, big, the whole cross-section. And I'm not saying only the big 10 or the big 20. Even the last 10 also did their jobs, and not surprisingly, I would say. I mean, I've been in this industry for a very long time now, and I was really surprised with the way India performed, as part of the National Disaster Management Authority, which I am. I was very, very surprised the way things were moving, and how the country came to rescue to its own citizens. I think I would say all kudos goes to everybody who played their little, small, or large role, be it by train, truck, warehouse, 3PLs, operators, everybody that did that. So So as Jagjeet said, yes, there is something that we are quite capable of doing, but at the same time, there's something which is missing. Because when we come to the normal, then we become a you know, uh, and that's what we want to find. What to answer your question, Rakesh, that what has actually happened over the past several years, third-party logistics service providers are nothing but are expected to be experts like doctors. We've always been while selling that please focus on the core competency, which is to do manufacturing and marketing. Allow the distribution competency to remain with us. Let us do warehousing, let us do transportation, last mile, hyperlocal distribution, whatnot, but let's focus on our capability. But has that actually happened? Does your client come to you as a patient? The answer is no. Are you a service provider? The answer is yes. So look at the difference now. When you say that you are a service provider, fine, you are literally, and most of us, and again, I'm saying, please do not look at top 5 companies, because the ecosystem is not about the 5 companies. As we all know, not more than 10 to 15% of the warehouses that exist in the top 8 metropolitan cities are actually A-grade, so-called A-grade warehouses, including the one that Hemant is probably making. Okay, so the point is that these are only 10% of 8 cities. If I aggregate the entire country, it will not be more than 1.5 to 2%. Okay, the reason is that still there is a gap between what the customer looks at you as and what you make the customer see you as. Still, many customers find gaps in the expertise of the service providers, and therefore starts dictating SOPs and terms and methodologies, which otherwise should be not dictated, but should be automatically embedded and followed by the 3PLs. Okay, so the point is that yes, we are great firefighters. I completely agree with what Jagjeet said in terms of firefighting capabilities. But are we people who operate in normalcy, and do we ensure that there is no firefighting even during a normalcy? I think that's where the gaps are. There has been a huge transformation, regardless of what I'm saying. There has been a huge transformation that has taken place. I mean, the more I keep visiting third-party logistics warehouses of everybody who is sitting out here, at this moment, and hundreds of us who are not here, I've visited all the warehouses, and I've seen that in most of the cases, there has been a huge transformation, especially in the past 10 to 15 years, especially. And the transformation rate has only increased every year on year, which means adoption to technology, use of better infrastructure, better skilled people, by integration of WMS with WCS, okay, automation in place, better vehicles, larger vehicles, faster vehicles, adoption to integrated technology, like he just mentioned about the e-pass, tracking and tracing, etc., etc. All that is very, very well happening. And from that point of view, I still feel that there is good standards, and obviously there are a lot more improvements that we need to do. Coming quickly to the warehouse infrastructure. Okay, I completely don't believe the fact that there is any standard or any proper methodology that has been adopted to rate warehouses as A, B, C, D. Okay, so reports that are being brought out by IPCs to say that 30% or 25% of aggregate warehouse stock, is A grade. I don't even think that they've ever done an audit, to say that this is A, B, or C. The fact is that landlords are still being penny wise and pound foolish. I still feel that people are cutting corners. We still have leaking roofs. Okay, we have cracked floors. Okay, We don't have sufficient aprons, vehicle aprons and yards for us to be able to handle 40-foot containers. Okay. So keep the 10%, as I mentioned, aside, and let's look at the 90%. The big change and the big bang will happen when part of the 90% starts activating itself towards modern infrastructure. Let us look at technology in infrastructure. Methods of construction are still very, very primitive. Okay, concrete is still not coming from the right plants. Forget about everything else. Okay, steel, some of them are not even getting it from the right rolling mills and therefore want to cut costs. Okay, standing seam roofs are leaking, which is supposed to be the most advanced roofing system. Why? Because we don't have the right machines to assemble them. We don't have the right people to do it effectively. Okay, so the point is that yes, there has been a lot of adoption to new and modern clothing, but we're still learning how to button up our shirts. Okay, we still are learning how to zip up our trousers, and sometimes we end up with a skin pinch. Okay, so these are the issues that we need to look at, and then we start. And these issues can only be looked at if we get together and start being true to ourselves. We start looking to each other and start collaborating and saying, let us all agree that we are at 45%. And let us all agree that we want to go to 95%. And what do we need to do? I think the other myth amongst customers, and I'm talking here as an ex-3PL provider, the myth amongst customers, the customers are still not integrating with their service providers. The customers are still looking at you as a supplier or as a guy who's supposed to do the dog's job. Okay. So unless
Thank you, Arif. We'll come back to you. I think you brought about a lot of good points. And it's very interesting that customers are not integrating with service provider. I think one data that I was looking at the KPMG report is that in the areas of e-commerce, this was pre-pandemic, 80% of the logistics is provided by the e-commerce industry itself. The 3PLs have not been able to make much difference, and the organized players have been marginalized. And in that case, I think there is a need for companies who want to use omnichannel to collaborate in a big way with 3PL to understand e-commerce and compete with e-commerce, because they would have had better network, better scale, and better pricing that could have been offered. But nothing has happened of that kind. Anyway, you brought about a lot of critical element of the state of warehousing. I would not like to go into each element of what you said. You're more a designer and a perfectionist in this process. But I have with me Hemant from Greenbase. Hemant, is a very passionate warehouse builder through the industrial spaces. And with the emergence of the industrial spaces, though they do not have significant proportion of growth that we have seen in the warehousing, I think there are some changes that are being seen. As I said earlier, most of them are at least ESG compliant, and that's a good way of looking at is that they will also bring in the element of not cheap labor, efficient labor paid properly, because it's not about arbitrage, it's about treating human beings. This pandemic has treated us in a big way. So Hemant, what do you think that these changes in pandemic are being incorporated in the modern industrial spaces infrastructure, which would help logistics and the ecosystem to do better?
Okay. Good afternoon, everyone. First of all, mandatory thanks to, it's not just mandatory, but I'm always honored and delighted to be part of any event that ISCM does. And thank you, Rakesh, Girish, and Jaisal for inviting me to represent Greenbase and Hiranandani. It's always an honor to be here, because one is, I look at this as an event where there's a lot of substance, there's a lot of knowledge sharing, and more than that, I get to meet with a lot of industry stalwarts. So it's always, I always look forward to attending this events, even though if it is on a weekend. So thank you. That was a very passionate and very good remark from my friend Arif, and I understand where the frustration comes from. And I think we as developers probably have still not done what we need to do to make this logistics more efficient and more cost optimized. I know there are a lot of players who are responsible in this whole cycle of the supply chain industry. So you have the government who's doing the bit on the infra, and I think we should leave them to do what they're doing. There's a phenomenal work and a lot of things that have happened. Of course, we can always say that it's very slow, but let's understand what the challenges are. We are not a China, we are in India, where a lot of things have to happen through the process of what we did. I was just attending a public hearing yesterday, and I can tell you it's very difficult to get all parties to agree to something. So I think we should applaud the government for what it is doing, for what they are doing, and Mr. Gadkari in particular, we've met him so many times, he's doing a brilliant job. The logistics service providers have their duties in what they're doing in terms of automation, in terms of digitalization. 3PLs are doing, Just Jeet at his end as being a warehouse operator, as well as LSP, as well as a 3PL. So designers are doing the bit. We just saw Arif expressing his frustration and went and urging everyone to do better. And I'm sure he is making everyone wherever he's associated to give the best in terms of design. Now, we've been through this whole cycle for the last 1.5 to 2 years since the pandemic has hit us, and we as developers realize that of course we are not direct contributors to this whole process in terms of getting India higher up in the logistics index. But yes, we realize that we have also our critical roles to perform. We have our responsibilities as A-grade developers, like what Arif again said, that it's only 10% of the stock that is still we can categorize as grade A warehouse. So that needs to increase very swiftly and very quickly if we have to improve the performance of the logistics sector. What we are doing as developers at Greenbase, where it's a joint venture between Hiranandani and Blackstone, we are focusing on 4 things. One is smart design, smart living, smart energy, and smart infra. So what we're just focusing on these 4 things, and I feel that if we as developers can get this right, we would have done our bit, and then we'll leave it to the other players to take it forward from there. Because I think it's the warehouse, it's from where it all begins. The whole journey of the supply chain starts from the warehouse and from where it originates. So in terms of smart design, we as Arif again said about standing seam roofs leaking, floors cracking, doors not provided properly, cross-docking not done. So we're ensuring we are talking to the best design teams. We are taking best international and global specifications and incorporating them into our design. We are ensuring that the suppliers, the contractors whom we are associating are doing the jobs properly. We're not trying to. We understand that if this bit is not done properly, roofs will leak, floors will crack, and then there's so much of disruption, and then the whole cycle goes for a toss. So that's one thing that we are doing: smart design. We also understand that to have digitalization and automation in the warehouse, in the warehouses, you need to make the design agile and be ready to, so that the LSPs as well as the people who are going to operate them, 3PLs, have the warehouse which is built to those standards, so that all these automations and new processes can be efficiently incorporated. So we're ensuring that heights are properly maintained, the cross-dockings are done. Data connectivity is something that we have realized it's going to be very important, given that a lot of people are going into IoTs and data and digitalization. So we're ensuring that the best service providers in terms of data are available. In this thing, I would like to also mention that we are collaborating with our group company in terms of ensuring that wherever it's not that everywhere, but wherever we'll have an industrial park, we're trying to put up a data center as well. So that means that you'll have strong fiber connectivity, strong data, strong teams to whom you can outsource your data connections and ensure that your digitalization of the warehouses is possible. In terms of smart energy and smart infra, we realize that a warehouse is a warehouse, but if the infrastructure around it is not built to the standards that is necessary, it's of no use. So we are ensuring that the power connectivity in terms of the quality of the power and express feeder lines where there are no power outages. So we are I would say discussing this with the government and ensuring that enough power is available for expansion and for the current needs as well as for future expansion, and that the power is of an express feeder quality, which means there are no power outages, not even on a weekday. And if ever there are, these are with notices. So that helps in bringing the cost down. You don't need to depend on DG power. You don't need to have weekly offs. You can plan your work 24/7, and which I feel is the necessity of the hour, given that customers are so that the delivery times have come down drastically, single day delivery. So this is one thing that we are doing. We are also doing one more thing, which is in terms of smart living, and I think this is where the Hiranandani heritage comes from, and what we have been building successfully for so long. Build an ecosystem which is having everything. So it's not going to be just a logistics park. It's not just going to be an industrial park. We are ensuring that this will be a self-sustained and an ecosystem where everything is available. And this we realized when we spoke with a lot of service providers and 3PLs, that the biggest challenge that they faced during the pandemic was their warehouses were shut because people were not able to travel from wherever they are living, and they were not able to just carry out the operations. What we are doing is we are ensuring all our parks are under the integrated industrial area policy, which means that we are allowed to build amenity spaces, support infrastructure in terms of affordable housing, workers' quarters, schools, hospitals, entertainment zones, everything that is necessary. It's just like a small township. We have created this something like this in Chennai, which is part of 300 acres township where the industrial part and the residential and the commercial and everything is integrated together. This means that service providers now can actually house their people, essential people, right at close to their warehouses. That means that even in case of a lockdown, you're just walking down. It's walk to work concept. This, I'm sure, will definitely improve the efficiency and services of the people who are going to operate. Another thing that we are doing is safety. We realize one more thing is the safety of people. Most of the warehouses or logistics parks that you would see are away from urban centers where people have to travel that last mile distance. And safety of people is very important when you have got people like Amazons and Flipkarts and the other coming in. They have their own safety standards. We are ensuring this by doing one more is speaking to the local police, putting up beat post at the site, ensuring that even if women have to work at late hours, their safety is ensured. That means people are happy to work over there. People are without any fear to travel, and we are also ensuring that last mile connectivity in terms of providing transportation to the people to the nearest transportation hub. We'll provide buses, we'll provide support through whatever means we can, so that people do not have any fear in terms of traveling and in terms of movement. So this is something which we call as smart living and smart design. Now, in terms of the industrial space, we're doing both logistics as well as industrial. Industrial is where we are seeing a lot of demand that is coming, and I think that if we harness this demand that is coming from, I would say, the exit China wave, if it can be properly harnessed, then there is a huge potential for industries to come into India. And when industries come in, there's a huge explosion of warehousing as well. So both work together, both work simultaneously. What we are doing is we are working with the embassies, we are working with the commerce ministries. We are ensuring that all these companies that are coming to our parks or to India are able to get those incentives and benefits, subsidies from the government, grants from the government. We are guiding them as to what needs to happen. Somebody needs an EOU or an export-oriented unit vis-a-vis an SEZ. We are guiding them. What are the benefits in an SEZ? What are the benefits in an EOU? How you can avail those benefits? We have a team who assists in making the presentations. Take it to the government. We have a strong industrial licensing team where we are very well connected with the authorities, who help these companies in terms of getting those benefits. What this means is you're saving on costs which actually are there. You're not doing anything different. You're just helping in realize cost saving which are already there. This means that the whole system becomes more efficient and more cost optimized. Last but not least is the automation, and I told about material handling systems and photos and the health and safety of the people, making warehouses compliant to safety standards, zero touch policies, ensuring that all the new systems in terms of health standards are maintained at our places. There are proper checks for people who are coming in, especially on if the warehouses are related to food and pharma. All those things are being done at our end.
All right, thank you, Hemant, for such a elaborate, spacing of industrial spaces and warehouses. I think there's two main things that I would take home from this. The first one is that can we start looking at warehouses and the localities livable and workable and respectable? And I think that's a brilliant concept that's happening with Hiranandani Green Base. It's an amazing concept. Second, industrial spaces that are important for making India realize its dream of being a great destination, both for service and manufacturing for the world as a location. And I think the nearshoring and other things can happen. So thank you very much for that. As you know, we had a good time for each one of us to talk about it. We may not have much time. I would request all of you to be very brief now in this part of it. We'll run over it. And as Sachin has to leave, Sachin, my question was unanswered on the second part, that during the pandemic, there's been a lot of use of railways. And there's a question by Sudipta Mandal who says that, do you think Indian Railways should work with private players to improve the cargo services? What could be the collaborative framework? And what could be the strategy forward? But you have to be very quick.
Okay, sure. Thank you, Dr. Singh. There definitely has been a typical response during pandemic. I think two things which have happened, apart from a proof that rail services are less prone to disruption during periods when the manpower part of workforce gets impacted the most, because the number of people who are required for running of a train is far too less as compared to that for running of, let's say, the cargo carried on trucks or let's say containers on road trailers. So, these trains are essentially that last mile has shifted away from consumer into the industry sector. Everyone is relying, to a very great extent, people are relying on ordering their stuff online, at least in the urban and semi-urban spaces. And the retail part of it gets delivered to the doorstep. So this is a great opportunity for the e-commerce part of it, and that brings in the e-commerce related logistics back into the play. However, the rail segment part of it requires a great deal of work to be done by Indian Railways from the point of view of preparing it for intermodal play. And as you rightly said, Indian Railways will have to collaborate with private operators. So there are, let's say, certain 19 private operators who are operating at present container trains. They can be called the intermodal operators, which operate railroad service in containers, so that domestic cargo can be carried from point of origin to point of destination, not just from railhead to railhead, but from door to door. There is a paucity of rail capacity, route capacity on Indian Railways. That is why the speed of trains is so slow. And that is why the reliability of the service provider by these intermodal operators is questionable from the point of view of the users of the service. The second part is that of parcel size. Unless it is containerized, it is not possible to get a truck size carried by a train. Basically, that is where we have to go to. And in order to do that, in order to make rail transportation friendly for the manufacturing sector, something that I brought out in my initial discussion, is going to be of crux. And that is where Indian Railway will have to switch over from its bulk transporter into an intermodal transport friendly network. And this is something which can happen by creating adequate capacity and developing clean cargo terminal across all its public goods sheds, which will be open for all operators. This is something which is going to bring in revolution as far as use of railways by private sector is concerned. And after pandemic, I don't think there would be any need to convince the private sector manufacturing segment to use railway if it is available. The current dependence on road transportation is primarily because it is very difficult to deal with Indian Railways. It is very difficult to get any solution out of Indian Railways, which has got price certainty as well as which has got a service certainty. I think that's how it is going to play out.
Thank you, Sachin. I think for such a brief and nice thing. We have one more panelist, Anup Chauhan from Arasya CCI. I think he's missed out. Anup, can you come on the camera, please?
Yeah. Thank you, Doctor.
Sorry, anyway, when a professor of a student misses him out, then he doesn't have much risk, you know. So welcome to the roundtable retreat. I think we have discussed a lot about 3PL. I'll come back to you as a question later, as there are a few questions on 3PL. I would like to know a post-pandemic growth strategy, which would really build capabilities of 3PLs to provide better solutions to service providers. Because one of the things that I see is that most 3PLs service the existing growth. They do not have a growth strategy by building capabilities for the markets of the future. What are your views on this, and how have you all dealt with this?
No, I think very valid discussion which has been going on, and I think very valid some of the components which have been raised, and they are directly linked to the question that you're, seeking upon. So the first point, if you see the adaptability, I think everybody has said we've been in a firefighting mode, we've been fast to change, but I think we need to really understand this is the new normal now. So change is going to continuously happen because customers have seen it. Customers have seen that we can manage the change, and the consumers are also seeing that. So this will be a common constant. So we cannot go back on this. And I think as a 3PL organization, we all were little wary at one point of time that how much change we can do, how much the customers will support us, who will fund what, how much the investment will happen. But I think we have gone over that road. We know which path to move on. So that is one good thing which has really happened. But while saying that, I think there are a couple of key elements which has really happened. One is the seamless execution. The organizations, I'm very happy to share, whether it is Avasya, whether it is all the other 3PL companies, I think there has been a seamless execution in some of the major projects during the COVID-19. Now, that guard cannot go lower. It has to continuously improve upon. If there are some changes, if there are deferment of timelines, if you have to tell customer upfront that this is what can be done in the given set of time to continue the customer delight, I think that sort of discussion should happen with the customer these are collaborative discussion. I think what Mr. Arif was also, discussing about, and this time is changing the, mindset. I think what Mr. Arif said was right at that one point of time. But I think we should make use of this time where the customers are really coming very close to the 3PLs. 3PLs have to go 10 times close to the customers to understand what the change requirements when we talk about integrations, when we talk about infrastructure. On infrastructure, also a very good point came that, the A-grade warehousing is around 10%. So my question is, out of 10%, how much the cubic utilization is happening? Even that is a very big challenge. And that really comes to the another point which the fellow panelist was talking about, the urge of investment, how much to invest in. So 3PLs definitely will have to invest to an extent, which is feasible. Customers definitely will have to support that investment also backwards, which will help us to make full utilization of the A-grade warehousing on the cubic, spacing. Once that happens, I think the shaping of the logistics in the right direction is really happening. And then, whether it is Hiranandani, Blackstone, All Cargo, we all are moving in the right directions. And yes, the last point, I think, Dr. Singh, what you asked on the service offering, I think that is a key change. We cannot continue to give the services in isolation. There has to be a good amount of integration which needs to be done. So if you see the acquisition that we done around Gati, that was the last mile of the last mile deliveries, which we didn't have. So that was one of the pointers that we get done. So now from the international to the last mile delivery, we can deliver any point of services to customers. But having said that, we are going into a different model now. We are looking at CFS plus. So as you know, we have container phase stations. We are also looking at how we can consolidate our warehousing next to our CFS also, and how our customers can get benefited by virtue of doing those steps. So that is another service offering that we are looking at. So yes, we'll have to innovate around service offerings, and we'll have to give an integrated view, seamless view to our customers to be sustainable.
There's a question from Atul Jain for Arif, which says that companies still consider service provider as suppliers, but simultaneously we don't see enough value creation by 3PLs. So Jasjeet, Arif, and Arif can answer this. Maybe I can ask Anup also to come.
I will just moderate it, which I will then require Jasjeet and Anup to respond to it. So yes, I agree with the gentleman who's raised this question, that the expectation, the positive part of this question is that there is an expectation from the customer that supply chain service providers, 3PLs, need to be seen as experts or need to deliver themselves as experts to the solution or the problem that customers are writing. Now, I think to take a few bites, from what Jasjeet and Anup have said, there is definitely multiple steps that have been taken over the past 10 years. Fine. And I'm sure that now the steps will be taken much faster. I would like Jasjeet and Anup to spend half a minute, 45 seconds on this and share how are they grooming themselves. I'm not talking of specific companies, but how is the 3PL ecosystem, okay, grooming itself to transform from a simple service provider to a specialist?
Yeah, thanks, Arif. I think thanks for moderating that question. And I think it's a question depending on the maturity of the industry per se. So let's look at logistics, transportation, supply chain, and solutions all in different buckets. Sometimes people are looking at a transactional thing and say we don't get a good 3PL. So 3PL is not only brawn, he's the brain with that. Now, if you look at any supply chain, probably you have the production logistics, which is from a suppliers to your plant to make something. Second is your within your plant stuff, then your distribution, and which also includes your warehousing as well as sometimes an aftermarket and managing those warehouses. I think like when I talk about ourselves, we are now in the business for 20 years. And so as supply chain solutions, we never come and give a service. We don't call it supply chain services. What is your problem statement? What is your business needs? And they're different from different companies. So a leading company, let's say if it's these three place, HUL and a Procter & Gamble have different needs, and versus ITC. So you can't have a one size fits all. So if somebody is wanting a 3PL service, he has to have first matured enough to understand what it means, is that you're getting the experts who have got cross-industry knowledge, understanding of the Indian environment. And now I'm asking him, I'm putting up a plant here. Can you please do the production logistics for me for every single item coming in till I make the final product? And we do it for a plethora of clients. Almost all the auto companies, I think if you look at the auto industry, you look at the e-commerce industry, look at the consumer durables. These are the most mature ones. Retail comes in next after that.
Yes.
So they all do it. In terms of warehousing, it's mostly about productivity management, ensuring that the fill times are kept. Now, India has managed so well from a DC to a FC culture. DC was from a business to business, sending out large boxes to a retailer, and FC culture, fulfillment center, sending out a certain item to a customer. If you look at what you order online, it comes in so fast. So somewhere out there, someone is doing that order picking, packing, dispatch, that's being sorted in different boxes as per pin code and reaching you much before time every time. So this couldn't have happened.
And very accurately. They all, I mean, it's on time and it is in full.
Not this backbone being there. So sometimes I feel in such forums, थोड़ा सा हम अपने आप को pull down कर लेते हैं. Actually amongst the best in the world at what we're delivering, but we have run out of fuel for it. Our people are working very, very hard. Unlike a 9 to 5 kind of a thing, 8-hour shifts, sometimes our people end up working 12 to 14 hours. So we're putting in more effort, but end of the day, I think what we are able to give is a very cheap cost service. Look at the cost per package. Look at the fuel cost. Our fuel cost today, US is $5 to the gallon. India is at a price which is larger than 100 rupees. It compares to same level as the US price. Look at logistics cost for India. Interest cost, dekho wahan ka. Interest cost for India. We are very, very competitive in our country. And I think we are right up there with solutions, but you have to understand what you are putting yourself for. Are you wanting a transaction? Brawn chahiye, ki you want the brain behind it. If you want the brain behind it, you'll get the best in class service. And there are a lot of people in India who are capable of doing that, but you have to first believe and let go.
Very good point, Jasdeep, in terms of you have to first believe, you know, and secondly, you need to decide whether you want brawn or you want brain. I think these are the two very important parts.
Anup, can you come in?
Yeah. So I think a very interesting discussion which is going on. There's 2 points I like to put. So first thing, I think question which has been raised is pretty valid because I feel it comes from the commitments we made at the time of signing an agreement and then living up to the agreement. That's very important. You cannot commit something and not achieve on day-to-day basis what you promised to the customer. So that has to be delivered. Or otherwise, you should be very upfront in saying that, you know, what can be delivered at what price it can be delivered. That's one point. Don't overcommit. And whatever you commit, you should deliver. That's one point. The other point also, I think I missed to connect upon was we were discussing about omnichannel. So it is the new way of supply chain management and how we will further integrate with the customers. Now, how many of us are really looking into that direction? Are we getting with our customers in a consultative mode where we are discussing that what change management they're looking for the next 5 years? Are we working backwards with them to collaborate further? I think that will be very, very important. Yes, I think it's a valid question. We need to go back more to the customers on a consultative mode and need to also see that are we aligning our technologies and investments in line to the customers' growth path.
Very good. I think that's a good point. We have come to the end of the session. We have taken 10-15 minutes more. So I think we will have to stop here. But thank you all of you for providing this, forum. The fuel for thought for everybody. Just these forums are open for all kind of thoughts that come in because they aggregate and they come out of it. Having said that, I think there is a need, which I see it very clearly, for the two service provider and them to come together. Like we have IBP within an organization and outside view of the 3PL has to come in a big way. Then only you can collaborate. If you are two different organizations thinking to be two different brains can bring variability in the supply chain, called bullwhips. And I think you all have experiences much better than I do. A professor can pick up things and talk about it. But this is something that is missing piece. Can we start collaborating and integrating our planning systems with our trusted customer? it would be a brilliant way to create a control tower and all kind of things and provide the best service using both the brains, and B into B is B square. I think that would be amazing. Not 2B, it's B square. That would have been amazing. So I thank Hemant, Jasjeet, Arif, and Anup and Sachin for providing this larger context to the debate. And thank you very much for supporting almost all the time. I've reached to all of you, your friends. Everybody is around to come and discuss. I missed the point of technology, Jasjeet, but I think there is a forum on ASLTS. I'll bring you on that for the 3PL technology, and hence we will take it. Thank you.